"Just wait by the exit, Mom. We'll grab the bags." That's what Evan said, right after hugging me with one arm and handing me a lukewarm coffee with the other. His wife, Brittany, didn't even fake a smile this time. She wore those enormous sunglasses that made her look like a fly, and her voice dripped sugar. "Will be 5 minutes, tops." I didn't think twice. I stepped aside, suitcase in one hand, paper cup in the other, and let them disappear into the river of travelers flowing past baggage claim. It was 11:16 a.m. The Denver airport buzzed with reunions and routines. A little girl ran into her father's arms, shrieking, "Daddy," loud enough to echo. A college student in a hoodie hugged her mom for so long it made me ache. And I stood near the terminal doors, smiling at nothing. Waiting. By noon, my smile was gone. I'd sipped the coffee down to bitterness and kept glancing at the sliding doors like they'd open and reveal Evan's sheepish face, Brittany's careless shrug. At 12:30, I called Evan. No answer. Called again. Voicemail. 1 p.m. I sat down. My hips stiffened. I crossed and uncrossed my legs. I texted, "Everything okay?" Still waiting near exit 3. No reply. By 2 p.m. I wasn't just humiliated. I was invisible. I watched another family reunion. An elderly woman holding a bouquet. A teenage boy wrapping her in a hug that lifted her off the floor. I turned away, cheeks burning with a shame I couldn't justify. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was still trying to rationalize it. Maybe something happened. Maybe a delay. Maybe they needed gas, or Emma had a meltdown, or... At 2:17, I opened Instagram. I shouldn't have. Brittany had posted a story. A short, looping boomerang of her and Evan clinking margarita glasses at some trendy bar I didn't recognize. She was wearing a white cropped jacket, one I bought her last Christmas, and flashing her perfect veneers. The caption read, "Quick detour to see friends," with a winking face and a palm tree emoji. Not a word about me. Not a mention. No, on our way to pick up Mom. No, can't wait to see her. Nothing. Just cocktails. Celebration. They'd left me at the airport to go have drinks. That's when something clicked inside me. Not like breaking glass, not dramatic, not loud. It was smaller than that. Quieter. Like the sound a deadbolt makes when it slides into place. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I just stood, picked up my suitcase, and walked. Out of the terminal. Through the sliding doors. Past the taxi line. I got into a cab. The driver didn't ask if I needed help with my bag. He just looked at me through the rearview mirror and said, "Where to?" I paused. I almost said it. Home. But the word choked in my throat. Home had become a word with edges. A place where I tiptoed around Brittany's moods, where I asked permission to bake cookies with my granddaughter, where I RSVP'd to family dinners in my own house. "Lakewood," I said. "Nearest hotel." He nodded. The cab pulled into traffic. The airport shrank behind us. I didn't look back. The hotel was beige and forgettable. A 2-star chain with stale air and a young girl at the front desk who barely looked up as she handed me a plastic keycard. "Checking in for how many nights?" "1," I said. Then added, "Maybe more." She gave me a look, but didn't ask. The room smelled faintly of Lysol and disappointment. I sat on the bed. Took off my shoes. Plugged in my phone. Still no calls. No texts. At 4:42 p.m, Evan finally messaged me. "Hey, sorry, we got sidetracked." "Everything okay?" Sidetracked. I stared at the word until the screen dimmed. At 5 o'clock, Brittany posted another story. This time it was a group selfie at a rooftop bar. She tagged some names I didn't recognize. Evan was in the corner of the frame, smiling like he was 16 again, like he didn't have a mother sitting in a hotel room 20 miles away, waiting for crumbs. And that's when I allowed myself the truth. This wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't just the airport. It was a pattern. A slow erosion. 3 years ago, when Evan lost his job, I opened up my savings account. No hesitation. "Whatever you need," I said. 6 months turned into 12. Then Brittany's startup failed. Then Emma's tuition. Then the roof leak. Then the short-term card issue. I didn't blink. I just paid. Because that's what mothers do. But somewhere along the way, my help stopped being appreciated. It became expected. I stopped being Nora, the mother who made Evan's Halloween costumes by hand, who stayed up with him through every fever and heartbreak. I became the woman who paid the bills and stayed out of the way. They'd taken everything from me, my money, my time, my holidays, but today, they took my dignity. I lay on the scratchy hotel bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling, thinking of all the small humiliations I'd swallowed. The Christmas I wasn't invited to host. The birthday dinner where they forgot to include me in the group photo. The time Brittany corrected my grammar in front of Emma. The time Evan said, "Mom, maybe don't bring up the past so much. It makes Brittany uncomfortable." I'd said nothing. Always nothing. Because I was terrified of becoming the bitter mother-in-law. The needy grandmother. The woman people whispered about. But today, this was different. This wasn't just forgetting. This was abandonment. Deliberate. Casual. A line had been crossed. And no apology, not even the rare kind that came with tears, could uncross it. I didn't answer Evan's text. I turned off my phone and let silence answer for me. In the stillness of that hotel room, something new began to take shape. Not rage. Not revenge. Just resolve. I didn't know what the next steps would be. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was done waiting to be treated like family. A week before the airport debacle, they threw me a dinner. That's what they called it. A celebration for your semi-retirement, Mom. Evan booked the restaurant, a bistro that charged $17 for mashed potatoes and made you pretend you liked everything in miniature. Brittany picked the guest list. No old friends, no colleagues from my firm. Just her parents, 2 couples from her yoga group, and a few of Evan's college buddies I hadn't seen in a decade. They seated me at the end of the table. Not at the head, the end. Between Brittany's mother, Paula, who never stopped talking about her gluten intolerance, and a woman named Taryn who kept calling me Noreen. There was no speech. No toast. Not until the plates were cleared and the cocktails started coming. Then Brittany stood up, holding a glass of Prosecco and smiling wide enough to show all her dental work. To Nora, she said, her voice syrupy. Without her, we wouldn't have survived. A pause. The dishwasher. Laughter. Evan chuckled. She's not wrong. I smiled. Because that's what I do. I smile. Even when it hurts. Even when I feel the temperature in my chest drop 20 degrees. What Brittany meant was that I'd paid for the new dishwasher last spring. The one that leaked into their basement. The one Evan called me about at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, panicked and wet and asking for a quick Venmo. That dishwasher cost me $1,499. I know because I still have the receipt. I paid for it. Just like I paid for the roof repair. And the overdue tuition for Emma's preschool. And the medical bill when Brittany forgot to renew their insurance. And the honeymoon, which wasn't really a honeymoon, just a wellness retreat in Sedona with facials and crystal therapy. It adds up. Not just in numbers, though I did the math once, late at night, alone with a calculator and a glass of wine. $85,000. That's how much I'd given them over 5 years. In checks, Venmos, wire transfers, and cash in birthday cards. $85,000, more than I ever spent on myself. More than I spent on Evan's college education. More than I'd saved for my own retirement. I called it generosity. They called it help. But the truth? It became obligation. My money wasn't a gift. It was infrastructure. I became their safety net, expected, unnoticed, taken for granted like a doormat or a paper towel. The worst part? I told myself it meant something. That maybe Evan would look at me with pride. That Emma would remember who kept her warm and fed. That Brittany, brittle as she was, might soften into kindness. Instead, they turned me into a punchline. At that dinner, after Brittany's toast, the check came. It sat in the middle of the table like a trap. Everyone avoided eye contact. Then someone, probably Paula, slid it toward me. "Oh, come on, you're the successful one," Brittany said, laughing. "Retired and rich." She didn't say it with malice. She said it like it was a fact. Like a compliment. Like a joke I was supposed to laugh at. I paid. Of course I did. With a tight smile and a swipe of my debit card. Later that night, Brittany posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, "Love celebrating the woman who proves some parents never retire or move aside." A laugh emoji. A clinking glass. I read it twice. Once hoping I misunderstood. Once knowing I hadn't. I didn't comment. Didn't like it. Just closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. That night, I took stock. Of my life. My money. My silence. I'd sold my consulting firm 3 months earlier. Not for a fortune, but enough to live on. Enough to breathe. After 38 years of meetings, mergers, and clients who called on holidays, I wanted peace. I wanted to garden. I wanted to take Emma to museums. I wanted to wake up without a calendar choked with obligations. Instead, I became an ATM with a pulse. A backup babysitter. A woman who waited for permission to be included. And I still had manners. I still smiled. I still sent thank you texts for dinners I paid for. Because that's what I'd been trained to do. By Evan's needs. By widowhood. By a culture that tells mothers we're only valuable when we're useful. The next morning after the dinner, I found Brittany in the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter, pouring Prosecco into 2 glasses. One of them, mine, had a tiny scratch on the rim. I remembered that scratch. It happened when Evan was 10 and accidentally dropped it while helping me with dishes. I'd kept the glass because I liked the imperfection. Because it reminded me of him when he still looked at me like I was magic. Brittany added something to the Prosecco. A few drops from a tiny brown vial. Her face didn't change. No guilt. No hesitation. No glance over the shoulder. I cleared my throat. She turned, startled. "Oh hey, I was just pouring us some celebratory bubbly." I smiled. Took the glass. Held it in my hand. When she turned to check her phone, I switched glasses. The one with the scratch, mine, became hers. The untouched one, hers, became mine. We clinked glasses. She sipped. I pretended to. 5 minutes later, her mother Paula took a sip from Brittany's glass, the one with the drops. "Unusual flavor," she said, making a face. "Kind of bitter?" Then she dropped. Like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Screams. Panic. 911, I stayed calm. At the hospital, St. Luke's, the doctors said it wasn't food poisoning. It was something called a plant alkaloid, specific, bitter, dangerous in high doses. Not lethal, not this time. But close. Too close. Paula recovered after a night in the ICU. The toxicology report confirmed it. Not spoiled food. Not bad alcohol. A substance measured and deliberate. Evan looked shaken. Pale. Like the air had been sucked from his lungs. But when he glanced at Brittany, when their eyes met, I didn't see confusion. I saw fear. Not of what had happened. Of what I might do now. Because he knew. And I knew. I'd spent my career reading people, their motives, their tells, the nervous tics that gave away intention. That night, in the sterile light of a hospital hallway, I read my family like a balance sheet. And the numbers didn't lie. I was an asset. Or a liability. But never a mother. Not anymore. The next morning, they arrived with pastries. Evan held a white bakery box like a peace offering. Brittany wore pale blue and smelled of lavender, the kind of soft, maternal hue you'd expect from someone who'd nearly killed her own mother. She smiled as if nothing had happened. Like the night before hadn't ended with an ambulance and stomach pumps and whispered phrases like acute alkaloid exposure. I stood in the doorway in my robe, not inviting them in. "We brought croissants," Evan said. His voice cracked like a boy's. Brittany held out a brochure. Not folded. Not crumpled. Fresh. Pristine. Cedar Ridge, a luxury community for active seniors. I didn't reach for it. She pressed it into my hand anyway. "Mom, just read it." "It's beautiful," Evan said. 20 minutes from their house. Gated. Landscaped. On-site medical care. Weekly art classes. Chef-prepared meals. An indoor saltwater pool. Entrance fee, $180,000. I flipped the brochure closed. The smile had never left Brittany's face. "They only need a power of attorney," she said. "It's standard." The word sat between us like a loaded gun. Standard. Like there was nothing suspicious about handing over full financial control of my life to the woman whose mother nearly died after sipping my drink. I looked at Evan. He couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he reached for my shoulder. We just want to keep you safe, Mom. You've been under stress. You're not sleeping. You're forgetting things. It wasn't concern in his voice. It was rehearsal. Like he'd practiced the lines. Like someone had coached him. I'd heard that tone before. In boardrooms. From lawyers explaining leverage takeovers. They always start with care. Always end in loss. I set the brochure down on the entry table and said, I'll think about it. Brittany beamed. Take your time. But there's only one open unit, so hurry up and sign your life away. After they left, I stared at the brochure again. There were little details. Ones they didn't think I'd notice. The name of the facility director, Dr. Alan Mercer. I Googled him. A geriatric psychiatrist with 3 disciplinary complaints. One filed by a woman whose children had declared her mentally unfit after she refused to sell the family home. I called my attorney, Mark Doyle. We'd worked together for years. He helped me sell my firm, draft my first will, settle Robert's estate after his heart attack on a cold Thursday in 2009. He was calm, sharp, and the only man who'd never asked me for anything but clarity. Within 48 hours, he'd scheduled a full mental competency evaluation with an independent physician. I passed. High marks. No signs of dementia. No impairment. No paranoia. Just intelligence. And caution. Then we rewrote the will. Stripped Brittany's name from every page. Replaced her with charities. Cancer research. Women's shelters. Environmental grants. Evan remained, but his share was now a modest annual stipend. Enough to survive. Never enough to fund ambition. Mark constructed trusts with iron locks and razor wire. If anyone ever challenged my capacity, the estate would bypass my heirs entirely. Straight to the causes I chose. The remainder would go to Emma, held in a legal cocoon until she turned 30, untouched by either parent. By noon the next day, my house had cameras. Motion sensors. A panic button in my bedroom. The technician was a quiet young man who worked quickly. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded when I told him to avoid visible wires and cover every entrance. When it was done, he handed me the controls and said, "You'll get alerts to your phone. If anyone tries to tamper, the system goes straight to 911. That evening, Evan and Brittany dropped by unannounced. I didn't buzz them in right away. I watched them from the security feed. They stood side by side like co-defendants. When I finally opened the door, I smiled. "Come in. I've been meaning to tell you I updated my will." The air froze. Evan blinked. Brittany tilted her head slightly, her smile held together by sheer force of habit. "Oh," she said. I nodded. "New arrangements. Mark helped." She laughed too quickly. "Of course. It's good to keep things current." Her voice had an edge, sharp enough to draw blood if you leaned in too close. Evan shifted his weight. "We should probably talk more about Cedar Ridge." "We will," I said. But we wouldn't. That night, someone knocked. It was Paula. Pale, bruised under her eyes, but standing. Alive. She wore a scarf and held a thermos like a shield. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "But I needed to talk to you." I let her in. We sat in the kitchen. She didn't touch her tea. "I remember the glass," she said. "The one Brittany poured for you." Her voice was slow. Careful. She had a little bottle. A dropper. She didn't hide it. We stared at each other. I told her what I'd done, the switch. Her eyes widened. "She tried to kill you," she whispered. "And I almost died instead." The truth hung between us like fog. We didn't cry. We didn't scream. We planned. I called Caroline Price, a private investigator I'd used once, years ago, to track a partner skimming funds. She remembered me. Took the job immediately. 2 days later, the report arrived. 3 refinances. A maxed-out home equity loan. $80,000 in credit card debt. Brittany's firm was flailing. Behind on payroll. Facing a quiet audit. And then the final page. A life insurance policy. $250,000. Taken out on me. Signed by Brittany. She was the sole beneficiary. The date? 6 months ago, when I'd first told them about the sale of my firm. When I finished reading the report, I didn't feel shock. I felt confirmation, the quiet, cold satisfaction of knowing your instincts were right all along. Brittany hadn't married my son. She'd acquired him. And I was the dowry. The next morning, I met Mark Doyle at his office. He was already standing when I walked in, sleeves rolled up, eyes alert. "You were right to call me Nora," he said. "This isn't clumsy manipulation. This is organized theft with a fallback plan if you die." He slid the policy across the desk again, tapping the signature line with his pen. "She forged your initials here. See the difference? The loop is wrong." My breath caught. My own name stolen like everything else. "What happens if something does happen to me?" I asked. He didn't flinch. "Then Brittany collects $250,000 and no one looks twice. They'll call it an accident or age. You've been alone long enough that nobody would question it." The words settled like frost. I wasn't frightened. I was furious. The kind of fury that doesn't scream, it calculates. Mark leaned forward. "Let them believe you're still pliable. We'll give them the rope. They'll hang themselves." That afternoon, I called Evan. I made my voice soft, almost timid. "I've been thinking about Cedar Ridge. Maybe you were right, honey. I should look at the paperwork again." The relief in his voice was almost obscene. "Really? Mom, that's great. Brittany can help you go through the details tonight." I let him think it was victory. "It's a lot to digest," I murmured. "Maybe over lunch tomorrow?" He agreed so fast it made me sick. The next day, I dressed carefully, navy blazer, pearl earrings, the same quiet armor I'd worn for board meetings and funerals. I met him at a restaurant downtown. Brittany arrived 10 minutes late, carrying a leather folder so thick it could have held a mortgage. "Sorry," she said, all brightness. Traffic was murder. I smiled at the word. Was it? Evan ordered for me without asking, salmon, no butter. I let him feel in control, the good son guiding his fragile mother toward the future he'd already spent. When the plates were cleared, Brittany opened the folder. Inside, contracts, disclosures, authorization forms, a paper mountain dressed as care. "We can take care of everything by Friday," she said. "They just need a signature and a verified copy of your ID. Oh, and power of attorney for the transfer. It's really simple." I flipped through each page slowly, letting the silence stretch until I could feel her nails tapping under the table. "I'll sign tomorrow," I said at last, closing the folder with deliberate calm. "I'd like one more night to think." Brittany's mouth tightened, but she forced a laugh. "Of course, Nora. We totally understand." I paid the check before she could reach for her purse. Her smile slipped a fraction. When they left, I called Mark. "They'll come tomorrow night," I said. "Bring what we discussed." That evening, Mark arrived at my house with 2 folders. One real, one decoy. The first contained the full documentation of Brittany's forged policy, Paula's testimony, and the investigators' findings, every fraudulent loan and signature tied to their names. The second folder held a different kind of paper, harmless legal nonsense granting power of attorney over an account with exactly $1 in it. Mark also called the Denver police. Not an emergency report, a preemptive alert. If anything happens, he told the officer on speakerphone, there's evidence of intent. I slept well that night. Deeply. It was the first real sleep I'd had in months. Friday arrived bright and sterile. The air smelled of spring rain and deceit. Evan and Brittany came at 10 sharp, all smiles and false warmth. She carried a suitcase this time, not just a folder. "Just to make everything official," she said. "You'll feel so much better once it's settled." I made tea. Poured it into my favorite porcelain cups, the ones my husband Robert gave me on our 10th anniversary. She'd always hated them. Said they looked too old-fashioned. That morning, she called them cute. We sat at the kitchen table. I placed my pen beside the papers like a loaded weapon. "Let's start with the power of attorney," Brittany said. "This one just authorizes us to act on your behalf for the transfer. Totally standard." Evan was sweating through his shirt. I could see the damp crescent darkening under his arm. I asked questions, gentle, aimless ones. How long would the move take? Was there a spa? Would Emma visit? Brittany answered each like a customer service rep on commission. Then I took the pen. I wrote my name. Slowly. Deliberately. Every letter neat and obedient. Perfect, she said, sliding the paper into her folder. I'll scan this right away. Mom, you'll love it there. I smiled. Oh, I'm sure I will. She was too busy checking her phone to notice the sound, faint at first, then louder. A knock. Expecting someone? She asked. Before I could answer, the knock came again. Firm. Rhythmic. Official. I looked toward the door and said yes. When I opened it, Detective Amber Reyes was standing there. Badge. Clipboard. Neutral expression. The kind of woman who'd seen too much and believed too little. Mrs. Winters? She asked. Yes. She turned to Evan and Brittany, who were frozen mid-sentence. Toxicology results just came back from St. Luke's Hospital. The substance found in Paula Renner's system was oleander extract. Same compound identified in the champagne bottle from your dinner. Brittany's skin went the color of bone. That's ridiculous, she stammered. I don't even know what that is. Detective Reyes set a folder on the table, the mirror of Brittany's, only heavier. The lab also matched partial fingerprints on the vial to yours, Mrs. Renner-Schultz. And, she continued, flipping a page, there's a life insurance policy on file listing you as the sole beneficiary of Mrs. Winters' estate. Evan turned to Brittany, his face unraveling. What is she talking about? Brittany's hands trembled. You think I'd poison my own mother? I think, Reyes said calmly, you intended to poison your mother-in-law. The silence that followed was thick, animal, electric. Then Brittany found her voice. You'll regret this, she hissed at me. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I looked her straight in the eyes. I already regret raising my son to trust you. Detective Reyes gestured to the door. 2 uniformed officers entered. The sound of handcuffs was oddly quiet, a metallic whisper that felt like justice. Evan didn't move. He just stood there, hands limp at his sides, watching his wife be let out like a child caught stealing candy. When the door closed behind them, he exhaled. Mom, he said, voice shaking. I didn't know. But he did. He knew something. Maybe not the poison. Maybe not the policy. But he knew the manipulation. The rehearsed concern. The way Brittany had been tightening the noose around me for years. And he had let it happen because it was easier than facing who she really was. When the officers left, I poured myself another cup of tea. Evan sat across from me, pale and broken, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. She said it was just to keep you safe, he whispered. Cedar Ridge. The doctor. Everything. She said you needed care. What kind of care requires my signature and your silence? I asked. He didn't answer. I looked at him, my only child, the boy who once slept on my chest after nightmares, the man now hollowed by fear and greed, and I felt something colder than anger. Finality. There was no fixing this. There was only truth. And consequences. After the door closed behind the officers, the silence in the kitchen felt like a vacuum. It didn't hum. It didn't rest. It pulled. Evan sat across from me, staring at the place where Brittany had just stood. Like if he focused long enough, maybe she'd reappear, smiling and invincible, the way he always wanted her to be. The way I once hoped she was. Mom, he said, his voice low. I didn't know. I set my teacup down. Carefully. The porcelain clicked against the saucer like a gavel. Didn't know what exactly? He flinched. It was subtle. But I caught it. That brief ripple of shame. Or maybe exposure. He tried again. I didn't know about the poison. About any of that. I swear. And the policy? His eyes darted to the folder Detective Reyes had left. He didn't answer. I leaned forward, voice steady. Did you sign it? Silence. Evan. He folded in on himself, palms flattening against the table, eyes closing like a boy bracing for punishment. I signed things she gave me. She said it was just precaution. Just paperwork. I didn't. You didn't read it. I trusted her. I sat back. Let the words sink. For a second, I thought I might cry. Not because of what he said, but because of how familiar it sounded. I trusted her. I had to. With everything. Tell me the truth now, I said. All of it. I deserve that much. Evan exhaled like he'd been holding it for years. He looked older than I remembered. Not mature, just worn. As if he'd aged more from moral corrosion than time. She told me the evaluation was just protocol, he said. She knew someone, Dr. Mercer, who could file the paperwork for the facility. Said it would be easier if we had power of attorney to move things quickly. And if you resisted, we'd push harder. I stared at him. What does that mean? He looked away. I stood. Walked to the counter. Opened the drawer where I kept spare chargers and bandages and pens that never worked. I pulled out his phone. Unlocked. Still warm from his pocket. Mom. I held up a finger. I'm tired of words, Evan. Let's look at facts. He didn't stop me. I opened his messages. Searched Mercer. Found them. Push her by Sunday, she'll beg to move. If she refuses, Mercer handles it. I read them aloud. Slowly. Deliberately. Evan didn't lift his head. I searched Will. Another thread, this time with Brittany. She still hasn't rewritten it. We'll need to act fast. Mercer says any paranoia helps the diagnosis. I stopped. Every illusion fell like ash. They hadn't just hoped to convince me. They had planned to override me. Legally. Clinically. Quietly. You were going to have me declared incompetent, I said. Evan finally looked up. His face was slack, his eyes rimmed red. Only if you wouldn't let us help. I laughed. It was short, joyless. A sound I barely recognized in myself. Help me? Or help yourselves? He didn't answer. I opened one more thread. Labeled private. It was Brittany. Photos of the Cedar Ridge brochure. A photo of my checkbook. Another of my pill bottles. No prescription pills, just vitamins. But the caption read, refuses to medicate. Possible cognitive decline. There was even a photo of me in the garden, kneeling to cut roses. Spends hours alone. Withdrawn. Reclusive. She documented me, I whispered. Evan wiped his face. She said we needed a record. In case anyone asked. In case a judge asked. He nodded, then caught himself. No, I mean. I set the phone down. I'm 62, Evan. Not 92. Not confused. Not fragile. I ran a company for 38 years. I navigated markets, contracts, mergers. I raised you while managing payroll. I buried your father and still kept us afloat. But you couldn't wait another decade for me to die, so you tried to erase me while I was still breathing. He shook his head violently. That's not what I meant. We needed help, Mom. The business. Emma's tuition. Brittany's firm was tanking. We were underwater. You wanted access to my accounts. His silence was my answer. I smiled. Cold. Certain. You thought I didn't know. But I did. So let me tell you the punchline. He looked up confused. The documents you watched me sign? I pointed to the pile on the table. They're fake. Decoys. You have power of attorney over an account with exactly $1 in it. The rest is in trust. Untouchable. If you try to challenge it, everything goes to charity. He blinked, stunned. What? You and Brittany were going to steal my life. But you'll get nothing. Not even access to the flower budget. He looked like I'd slapped him. You can't do that, he said weakly. I already did. He stood suddenly, pacing. You ruined us. No, Evan, I said, standing too. You tried to ruin me. He turned to the wall, breathing hard. We have Emma to think about. You can't just cut us off. You used Emma as leverage. That's not parenting. That's strategy. He turned back. I'm your son. You were my son. Now you're an accessory to attempted murder. And a co-author of your own downfall. We stood in silence, the space between us thick with history and betrayal. You don't mean that, he said, voice small. I do. And I have one final gift for you. I walked to the table. Pulled out the envelope Mark had given me. Inside, a stipulation. Evan would receive an annual stipend of $15,000. No lump sums. No inheritance. If he contested the will or attempted to manipulate Emma's trust, it would all dissolve to medical charities and legal aid foundations. This is your future, I said, handing it to him. He took it. His hands trembled. "This is humiliating," he muttered. "No, Evan. This is mercy." He looked at me for a long time, then at the folder, then at his own hands, like he no longer recognized them. He left without another word. I didn't follow. The house was quiet again. Not the brittle quiet of anticipation or fear. This was different. Still. Settled. Like the air had finally stopped bracing for impact. After Evan left, I sat at the table until the sunlight faded across the kitchen tiles. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just listened to the silence and thought, this is what truth sounds like. That evening, Mark called. "She's being held without bail," he said. "They're charging Brittany with attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." What about Evan? He's not off the hook. The DA's looking at conspiracy charges there too, especially if he signed anything or helped misrepresent your mental state. I exhaled, not with relief, with resignation. "It's not just about punishment," I said. "It's about ending the performance." Mark was quiet for a beat. "Then, you ended it, Nora. You didn't survive the con. You beat it." 3 weeks passed. I stayed out of the papers. Let the lawyers handle the noise. I spent my mornings in the garden, pruning roses that had bloomed late and stubborn. I liked them better that way, the ones that didn't follow the schedule. The ones that refused to wither on cue. The house felt like mine again. My rhythm. My coffee. My music. One Tuesday, Paula showed up. No warning, no pretense. She brought pastries from a local bakery and a file folder with printed articles about elder financial abuse. We sat outside on the porch, the air crisp with early spring. "I should have seen it," she said. I raised her. "You saw what she let you see." She always knew how to read a room. Even as a kid, she could mimic anyone's tone. Say what people wanted to hear. She wasn't cruel, not outright. Just strategic. We were quiet for a while, watching the breeze move through the trees like a nervous whisper. "She tried to kill me," I said finally. Paula nodded. "And she almost killed me instead." A long silence. "I think about that night," she said, voice soft. "If you hadn't switched glasses, you'd be dead. And I'd be in Cedar Ridge, stripped of every dollar I earned." She looked at me, then away. "Thank you." I sipped my tea. "You're welcome." That was it. No fanfare. No dramatics. Just two women who saw the battlefield clearly now, not with horror, but with precision. A week later, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then picked up. "Grandma?" "Emma." Her voice broke something in me. Not sadness, something older. A memory. A Christmas morning. A pair of socks I'd knit with her initials. The way she clung to my legs when she was 4, whispering, "Don't leave yet." "Hi, sweetheart." "I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked. I waited. "I didn't know anything. I promise." "They never told me." "I believe you." A pause. "I got into pre-law," she said. "Full scholarship at Stanford." I smiled. "That's wonderful." Another pause. "Can I visit this summer?" I miss you. I miss who I used to be around you." I pressed a hand to my heart. "I'd love that." Mark finalized the new version of my estate plan. Clean. Bulletproof. The kind of thing that could survive a nuclear assault, let alone another family betrayal. "If anyone tries to challenge your competency," he explained, "everything transfers immediately to the Cancer Foundation." He tapped a page. "And this clause means Evan can't access a single cent of Emma's trust, not now, not ever." "Good." He closed the folder. "You did this, Nora. You protected yourself. You exposed them." "No," I said. "I didn't expose them. They exposed themselves. I just gave them a mirror." He smiled faintly. "Still, not many people come out of something like this with clarity, let alone strength." "I had to," I said. No one was coming to save me. I had to become the kind of woman they were afraid of. Brittany was sentenced to 12 years. Evan got 3, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. A lighter sentence, thanks to a late, half-hearted cooperation agreement. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to. But the press did. The story spread. The quiet epidemic of elder abuse, framed not in bruises or screams, but in paperwork and manipulation. Sons and daughters gaslighting parents into care. Spouses siphoning assets behind the smile of duty. Paula went on to write a book. Inheritance Games, When Family Targets Your Future. She put my story in the foreword, anonymized but raw. I didn't ask her to remove it. The truth was important now. Not to me, to others like me. Women who loved too long. Trusted too hard. 3 months later, Evan's house was repossessed. Mark asked if I wanted to buy it back. Quietly. Out of principle. I said no. Principle isn't revenge. It's distance. I bought a smaller place in the foothills. Fewer rooms. Less noise. More sky. I painted the walls myself. Didn't tell anyone. Emma visited in July. She brought a law textbook and a notebook filled with questions. She hugged me at the door. You look strong, Grandma. I smiled. I am. We baked bread that afternoon. The kind Evan used to like as a boy. She didn't mention him. I didn't either. That night, we sat on the porch and watched the sun slide behind the pines. She asked, "Do you hate them?" I thought about it. No. I remember them. That's worse. She nodded. What's your biggest regret? She asked. I looked at the stars. Thought of the glass I didn't drink. The check I kept signing. The voice I kept swallowing. That I waited for permission to stop being polite. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Quieter. Too clean. Like it had been scrubbed of all the ugliness it was meant to hold. They brought Evan in through the side door, hands cuffed in front, eyes hollow, hair grayer than I remembered. Brittany followed behind him, chin high, lipstick perfect, as if this were a press conference, not a sentencing. I hadn't planned to be there. But Mark called the night before. They're both asking for leniency, he said. Brittany's lawyer's playing the first offense card. Evan's attorney is blaming her entirely. Typical. And the judge? I asked. He's neutral. But he's listening. I showed up at 8:55, 5 minutes before the hearing. No makeup. No armor. Just me. 62 years old, spine straight, voice ready. Inside, the room smelled like cold coffee and waxed floors. The clerk called the case number, and just like that, it was official. State of Colorado versus Evan Winters and Brittany Renner-Schultz. The DA went first. He outlined the charges in measured, clinical tones: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, exploitation of an at-risk adult. His voice never rose, but every word landed like a nail driven through wood. He played the 911 call from the night Paula collapsed. Then he submitted the life insurance documents, Brittany's forged signature, and the toxicology report. Followed by the messages. The surveillance footage. The psychiatric evaluations. My signed decoy forms. And then the centerpiece, the recording Caroline Price had captured, the one I didn't even know she had, until Mark played it for me 2 days before court. Brittany's voice, laughing on the phone. She signs, we win. She doesn't, she vanishes. Either way, Evan gets the money. And Evan, I'm tired of waiting. She'll fold. She always does. The courtroom didn't gasp. It froze. Then came the defense. Brittany's lawyer stood, pressed his palms together, and painted her as a stressed-out entrepreneur, a woman under immense pressure, misled by desperation. There was no intent to harm, he said. Only poor judgment. Then Evan's attorney stood, younger, sweatier, less polished. Mr. Winters was manipulated by a dominant spouse. He loved his mother. He had no knowledge of any attempt to harm her. The judge nodded, impassive. And then he called my name. Mrs. Winters, do you wish to make a statement? I stood, walked slowly to the witness box. Not because I was frail, but because I wanted every step to echo. I faced the judge, then turned, faced Evan, Brittany, and spoke. Your Honor, I began, I was not going to speak today. I thought the evidence would be enough. I thought letting them sit with what they did would be punishment enough. But silence is what almost killed me. So I won't be silent anymore. I took a breath. The room waited. For 5 years I gave. Not just money, though that came to $85,000. I gave time, babysitting, grocery runs, emergency loans, a down payment on their roof, a dishwasher, a car repair, a tuition deposit. And every time I gave, I smiled. I didn't expect repayment. I only expected love. I turned to the jury, to the gallery. I was wrong. I faced Evan. His eyes were red. I raised you with everything I had. Alone. After your father died, I stayed up nights clipping coupons, calling in favors, selling jewelry just to keep us afloat. You didn't know that. I didn't let you. I wanted you to feel safe. Loved. I stepped closer. But you grew up and decided that my love had a dollar sign attached. That it came with conditions, and if I didn't meet them, I wasn't useful. I wasn't family. I was a bank account with legs. Evan looked down. I turned to Brittany. You almost killed your own mother. Then used that mistake to push me toward institutionalization. You filed paperwork to strip me of legal agency, while smiling across my dinner table. She didn't flinch. She just blinked, slow and reptilian. You would have succeeded if I'd still been the woman you believed I was soft. Afraid. Desperate for approval. I paused. Let the silence sit. But I changed. The judge nodded. Mrs. Winters, please summarize. I held up a photo. Emma and me. Making cookies. Before the rot set in. I am not here because I want revenge. I am here because the next woman won't have a lawyer. Or a trust. Or a private investigator. She'll be alone, and she'll believe she's crazy, and her children will take everything before the world even notices. I turned to the judge. Don't let them walk away with less than they gave me. Give them the same mercy they showed. None. I sat. The courtroom didn't clap. But it didn't need to. The silence thundered. The judge sentenced Brittany to 12 years. No parole for the first 5. A restraining order to keep her 500 feet from me forever. Evan got 3 years. Lighter sentence. First offense. Plus remorse. He didn't look at me as they cuffed him. But I looked at him. And I thought, this was my son. He's not anymore. He is a stranger wearing a familiar face. Afterward, I stood outside the courthouse with Mark. Reporters hovered at the curb, whispering. I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. Mark turned to me. How do you feel? I thought about it. Like I've been holding my breath for a decade. And now I can finally exhale. He nodded. You're free. No, I said. I'm sovereign. 3 months after the sentencing, my roses bloomed again. The bush outside the kitchen window, the one that never used to survive winter, erupted with pale pink flowers, stubborn and beautiful. I didn't do anything special. I just stopped letting people trample the roots. The headlines faded. Brittany's face disappeared from the news cycle. Evan's name was buried beneath newer scandals. But I remembered. Not because I couldn't forget, because I refused to. Pain deserves its witnesses. And I'd been mine for long enough. The house stayed quiet. Not empty. Just full of better things, books, sun, the gentle clink of teacups that no one would poison again. Mark sent me the final trust documents. Clean. Sealed. Indestructible. If anyone, and I mean anyone, ever filed to question my competency again, the estate would dissolve automatically into cancer research and a women's legal defense fund. Evan's name was gone. Brittany's had been incinerated. Emma's remained, but with safeguards. She would receive nothing until 30, and only if she passed a written ethics interview and submitted an affidavit stating she'd had no financial communication with either parent in the prior 2 years. I didn't build traps. I built fortresses. Because I'd learned something bitter and true: family only matters when it behaves like family. Otherwise, it's just liability in your blood. Evan wrote once. A letter from prison. No apology, just a long, confused monologue about pressure, money, responsibility. He said he'd made mistakes, but he never named them. He asked me to consider reconnecting. I folded the letter once, then again. Burned it in the fireplace. Brittany didn't write. I never expected her to. She was all venom and forward motion, no backward glances, no sentiment. Her silence was the first honest thing she'd ever given me. Paula and I became friends. Not close, but bonded by trauma. We met for coffee every Tuesday. Always in public, always at the same booth. There was comfort in routine, in surviving the same woman and refusing to let her win. One day, she brought a proof copy of her book. A Quiet Theft: How Families Strip Elders of Power. I flipped through it. Recognized phrases from our conversations. Stories I'd told while trying to make sense of the ruin. "You want me to change anything?" she asked. "No," I said. "Let it be ugly. That's the only way it's true." Emma called once a week. She never asked for money. Never mentioned her parents. She talked about law school, a professor who reminded her of me, a paper she was writing on elder guardianship abuse. She said she wanted to intern at the foundation my estate would fund. The one that would activate the second someone tried to steal another woman's mind and body and name. I didn't trust easily anymore. But I believed her. At least enough to keep her number saved. I sold the house. Too many ghosts. Too many corners that whispered you loved people who would kill you for less than what your soul was worth. I moved into a townhouse near the mountains. Quiet. Clean. 1 bedroom. Room for roses. No guest room. When people asked why, I said, I'm not downsizing. I'm customizing. One morning, I ran into a woman at the co-op. Early 60s, steel gray hair, eyes that had seen betrayal and decided never again. She recognized me. "You're the one from the case, right? With the poison? The son and the daughter-in-law." I nodded. She said nothing else, just squeezed my hand and left. That was enough. I never remarried. Never wanted to. Not because love was impossible, but because peace was too valuable. Some nights, I sit in my garden with a glass of wine and think about how easily I could have vanished into a nursing home, into silence, into someone else's version of "she's not all there anymore." Instead, I built a second life with scars and stone and the kind of anger that keeps you alert, not bitter. People say forgiveness is freedom. I say clarity is. And now? I am 63. I am not gentle. I am not easy. I am not interested in reunion, redemption, or repair. I have become the version of myself they feared the most, self-contained. No one has keys to my house. My will is locked behind 6 signatures and a biometric safe. If I die, the instructions are clear: cremate me, spread the ashes somewhere high and difficult to reach, and give the bulk of everything I've ever touched to strangers more honest than my own blood. My legacy isn't cash. It's boundaries. It's vigilance. It's proof that women like me, used, mocked, underestimated, don't just endure. We end the story. On our terms. You know what Brittany said to me the last time I saw her? As the officers cuffed her wrists and pulled her toward the squad car, she hissed, "You'll die alone." She meant it as a curse. But I took it as prophecy. And I smiled. Because alone is not the same as unloved. It's not the same as unsafe. Alone is silence I chose. Peace I earned. A life where no one else writes my endings. They told me to wait by the exit. So I left. And I never looked back.